Hello, this is Caitlin Mistley, and I am interviewing Natalie Sheridan, who is a friend of mine who is in Wisconsin, who is actually a freshman at the University of Wisconsin. Natalie, is it okay if I videotape you?
Yes, that is fine.
Okay, awesome, thank you. So this is for one of the courses I'm in, and this course is all about becoming a better studier and a better student. So it's all about motivational techniques and study skills and how to improve them. So today I'm going to touch on some subjects for you about motivation. So I'm going to kind of explain them, ask you some questions, and then maybe we can go more in depth on how to increase your motivation and what factors are part of this. Okay, so there's two different types of motivation. One of them is intrinsic and one of them is extrinsic motivation. So if you're intrinsically motivated, you're motivated by internal forces, which means you could really enjoy a subject so you want to learn more about it. Or maybe it's a personal interest of yours so you feel more apt to pay closer attention. Whereas extrinsic motivation is when you are motivated by external forces. Thus, this could possibly be getting a good grade on an exam to raise your GPA. So let me give you a personal example for me before I ask you to give me an example for you so you kind of get what I'm going for. So personally, I am extrinsically motivated in an instance when I'm running. I really want to get a better time every time when I used to do cross country, so you always try to beat your personal record or your PR. So this is obviously a task that I'm being motivated by a goal or by an actual physical time that I need to achieve. So this would be considered extrinsic motivation. Whereas I'm intrinsically motivated perhaps to actually understand and learn something more about the major I'm going into. So this summer, when I wasn't being propelled or pushed to be motivated by actual physical grades, I was still interested in the science fields that I'm going into, so I would kind of do some research and want to generally understand more about it just to see like, hey, maybe this is a fit for me, this is something I really want to know more about. So this is something that's being motivated and pushed by my internal forces. So I have some questions for you about you and your personal motivation. So can you talk about a time where you felt intrinsically motivated?
Okay, so I have a very strong passion for dogs and also helping people out. So I often volunteer at my local Humane Society to give back. I'm intrinsically motivated by my love for dogs, so much so that I adopted a puppy from the Humane Society I worked for. She's a black lab and a red heeler mix. I was really happy to be able to give her a healthy home where she could be safe, because a lot of these dogs are not given these type of homes.
So I would agree that's the time that you felt intrinsically motivated, but have you ever felt extrinsically motivated in a similar regard or a totally different area of your life?
Well, this is definitely a totally different area, but as I just applied to colleges last semester, I felt very extrinsically motivated to get good grades my first semester of senior year so I could apply to the colleges I want to and get in. It made me really work harder in school, and I ended up going to the college I wanted to.
Do you think that any part of your college application experience could have been motivated by your internal forces as well? Or do you think it was primarily external?
I think it was primarily external, but I'm very interested in the field that I'm going to study, which is business, so that could have internally motivated me.
So which one do you think is more relevant in society? Which one do you think people are more so driven to complete their goals by?
I think that America is a place where people are really motivated by like money and success. So I'd say the external factors really motivate people more so than the internal factors, just because of how like our country kind of works and how money is correlated with success and happiness.
Do you think that extrinsic motivation is more important than intrinsic?
I think people would be more successful if they had intrinsic motivation. And I think the people that have both types of motivation are probably more successful in the long run. So I would say intrinsic is more important.
Do you think that intrinsic motivation is for people that are more happier, or people that are more successful and happy? Do you think they're more motivated by internal forces rather than just being driven by money?
Yes, because they're actually doing something that they care about personally rather than being successful with money and everything.
So, besides just being motivated by different forces, there's other different influences that can affect your motivation. So, one of these would be goals, and there's two different types of goals that I want to highlight on. And these are mastery goals versus performance goals, which are kind of like intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. So, mastery goals is you're just learning the material and you're learning, you really want to learn something front to back. Whereas performance goals is where this learning comes in place. And this is when you receive your good grades from you being motivated to really perform well at a certain task. As well, there's effort, and this is how your motivation is affected. So you either have good motivation or by using good effort or not. And then self-efficacy is you personally believing that you can complete such a task. So again, those are goals, effort, and self-efficacy. And I was just wondering, which one of these factors do you feel influences your motivation the most? So self-efficacy, believing that you can do something. Mastery goals is just really wanting to understand the material. Performance goals, trying to get the good performance grade. And your effort.
I would say performance goals because just my current situation. I'm trying to get into the business school at the college I'm into now, so I have to really put in a great amount of effort to do well so I can get into the school of my choice.
Do you think that your self-efficacy could have influence on whether or not you're motivated to? If you self-doubt yourself, do you think that you're going to be as successful as an individual?
No, I think that confidence plays a key role in someone's success, and I think that you need to find a good amount of confidence and believe in yourself enough to be successful in whatever you want to do.
So how are you inducing this positive self-talk in your current situation? I would say.
I just know what I'm capable of, and I put forth as much effort as I know I need to. And
to this point, have you felt discouraged in any way and trying to achieve your goals?
Well, I got waitlisted to the school I wanted to go to, so I was definitely discouraged then. But then when I got back in, my confidence boosted up, and I'm feeling good about where I'm at.
Awesome. So one of the things we've been using in this class that I'm taking is metaphors. And essentially what a metaphor is, it's relating two ideas and connecting them to different thoughts. So in class, we talked about active versus passive students. So this can kind of link to motivation as well. So active students are the ones that take control of their current situation. They ask for help outside of class. They really try to understand the content and do whatever it takes to be successful. Whereas passive students sometimes do not do this, and they're the ones that can maybe sit towards the back of the room and not ask the questions. So we were asked to create a metaphor to link these two types of students to outside thinking to make it more understanding and easier to understand to outsiders. So my metaphor was the flower and the bee, because flowers are kind of stationary in a sense, as is passive student. I would say they're more sedentary in nature. So they're kind of just there doing their own thing, and they really aren't motivated to be successful until active students, whereas the bees influence them and cause them to be successful. So passive students oftentimes feed off the energy of active students in order to be successful. So if you're a passive student and you see an active student taking control of the situation and trying to get that good grade, then the passive students could feed off this energy as well. So it's really important when creating a metaphor to actually make sure that the two things that you're comparing really can relate to the topic at hand. So in this case, the flowers are sedentary, they're not they're stationary, they're not moving, and that's how I view a passive student, whereas the active students are the bees, and the bees are the ones that pollinate all the flowers. They're the ones that going around, maybe not necessarily to the passive students, but they're making their rounds in the classroom to really understand the concepts that are at hand and be successful. So then, also, I believe that passive students are influenced by active students just as the flowers are influenced on the bees, or the flowers are dependent on the bees. So passive students are dependent to be active at least one time during their career in a classroom or outside a classroom in order to be somewhat successful. Because if you're going to be a passive student all the time, a flower by itself, without the bee aspect, there's no way that it's going to sustain life. So now that you kind of have a general idea of what a metaphor is, do you think you could come up with a metaphor relating extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation?
I think that maybe an example of an intrinsic example would be like a poker player, and then an example of extrinsic would be like the poker dealer. Like the poker player comes to the poker table really amped to play poker. He is internally motivated. He's the one that wants to be there and make the money and win, while the poker dealer kind of has to be there. Like they aren't really all that interested in poker, but they have to do it anyways. They're making their money that way. They have to deal with all the annoying gamblers, but like they're externally motivated because it's their job and that's how they make their living.
Do you think that the poker player could also be considered intrinsic because they're motivated to win money? Or extrinsic,
I think they could be, but it's like their reason for being there is a little different. Like one wants to be there versus one that doesn't really want to be there. They're just doing it for the money.
I could see how you could view the poker player and poker dealer relationship, but I think it would almost be better and make more logical sense if we did a metaphor between a poker player and maybe a spectator. So the poker player is extrinsically motivated because, yeah, they don't need to be there, but a lot of people play poker and gamble for the reward of money, which is an external force. So let's say the poker player is extrinsically motivated because they're there to win the money, whereas a spectator who could be watching from the actual casino or watching it on TV, for instance, they're intrinsically motivated because they really just enjoy watching the poker play. Like, their internal force is like, oh, I get some sense of enjoyment from watching this, so I'm going to do it. But then again, you also could make the argument that a spectator might be intrinsically or extrinsically motivated because they may be watching for techniques that they want to implement into their own gameplay so they can reap their own rewards in the future. So I guess in a sense you could view this big metaphor in multiple different ways, but I think the best way to exemplify intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation would to use the example of the poker player and the spectator, because if you're going to start putting in the poker dealer, you could argue that they have the same intentions as a poker player because they're both working. Most people work, some people work as poker players, but they're working to achieve the goal of money, which is an external force. So I think the best way to talk about this with your poker example would to be a poker player and a spectator. So on that note, what did you take away? Like, what is the biggest takeaway from this discussion? Did you learn anything?
After you taught me, what extrinsic and intrinsic motivation was, I didn't really know what it was, first of all. So extrinsic is whenever you're motivated by kind of like outside sources, like kind of money or like status, I guess, reputation. And intrinsic whenever like you really want to do it just for you. I kind of realized that I'm a lot more extrinsically motivated than I am intrinsically.